Welcome everyone to this episode of Magicians Without Borders Conversations. It's a little bit hard for me to do this episode at this time, but I'm going to tell you why in a second. But before I do, as always, thank you for being here. And remember, if you want to support us, this is a great way to do it. We've got some wonderful corporate magic shows for virtual events. We've been doing this for teams of tech companies in all over the world, and they're being wonderful. And I cannot stress enough how important they are at this moment for our students in the slums of Colombia. They're actually changing realities with this. So if you know of any company that's working in a remote environment, or you are a remote worker and you want to enhance your remote workers' well-being, you can do this with one of our virtual corporate magic services that we provide. So these are great for this new virtual era. And also, if you go to store.magicianswithoutborders.com, you can get our magic services that we provide online, like shows and workshops that you can learn from us online. And you can buy a whole course called Become a Magician that our founder Tom Verner did, and it's wonderful. And to remind you also that we've got a mailbag episode every last Wednesday of the month. And before I bring Tom on, I just want to tell you why this is going to be a hard episode for me to go through today. And it's because the country where I am at, the country where I am from, is going through a crisis. It's going through a crisis, and this, we cannot hear it from now, but there's a lot of civil unrest in Colombia. That background sound is what I am hearing actually outside my window. It's something that we've been dealing with for the past years here in Colombia. And I want to give a little context onto what's happening and why I'm saying that there's a distress signal that we need to send from Colombia. So Colombia's distress started long ago. In this last part, the first public display of recent unrest was in November 2019, where a national strike was called for, and it ran for a couple of days. And the president then created like a conciliation table with a lot of actors, and then they came up with some outcomes of it that regarded health, education, housing, economic distress, and corruption. But unfortunately, none of those items were really addressed because in 2020, COVID hit and the pandemic, exacerbated the situation and accelerated the pitfall that we are now in. Actually, according to our National Administrative Department of Statistics, it's called the DANE in Colombia, the level of poverty in 2020 rose to 42%, meaning that of a country of 50 million people, 21 million people are poor, of which 7.4 million live in extreme poverty. And even before 2020, if a household, not an individual, a household earned 7.5 million pesos, which is roughly $1,950 or $1,950 a month, a household, right? Which a year is roughly $23,000 a year. You are part of the richest 3% in Colombia. So with those statistics, a few months ago, the government, through its president, presented a new tax reform, which is the third tax reform of this term of the president, meaning that in the past 3 years, he has come up with 3 tax reforms. And this tax reform was the drop that, had spilled the cup that, as I told you before, started way back in 2019. This tax reform included adding taxes to everyone for goods that are basic, like eggs, butter, milk, stuff like that. They were gonna tax those with 19%. And if you live in a country with that situation that I just explained, it just becomes very, very hard to do. But not only that, the tax reform involved a lot of things like taxing the lower middle class for income tax and a bunch of other stuff that's not worth getting into. But that tax reform was the drop that exacerbated the cup. And then on the 28th of April, a new national protest was called for, and since then we've seen young people in the streets nonstop. And what that has caused, it has caused some positive things, meaning that 2 days ago the tax reform was nullified. They're gonna bring it back and they're gonna create a new one. The minister that proposed that tax reform resigned along with his vice minister. But also, there's been a huge burst of violence. There's not 2 sides to this. There's many sides. It's way too complex. But to summarize it, we've seen one of the biggest police repressions in recent history. Well, actually, in all of history that I can remember from my lifetime. We have a police force for anti-riots here. It's called the ESMAD, ESMAD. And they have been very, very violent with protesters. There's been a lot of shootings, and most of them, or a lot of those, have been transmitted live via social networks. There's an NGO here called temblores, which translates like earthquakes or tremors, that through their shout platform, a platform that allows people to call out police brutality and other forms of oppression, have since or to May 8th, since April 28th to the 4th of May, sorry. So from April 28th to the 4th of May at 8 a.m., they had these statistics. There had been 1,443 cases of police violence reported. There have been 814 arbitrary detentions of protesters. There have been 216 victims of physical violence from police. There have been 77 cases of gun shootings by the police. There have also been 10 victims of social assault by local law enforcement. And what's worst of all, 31 victims of homicidal violence by the police. There's also been some deaths by the police and local law enforcement. This has, just been out of control. Our government is not listening. They need to end this. They can end this. They have the power to end this, but they cannot do. They're not willing to do it. What's more, a UN commission arrived to one of the cities with the worst unrests of all, which is called Cali. And when the UN commission arrived at Cali, in this alleged situation, they were shot upon by the local police enforcers. So we have a great unrest here. So this is why we're signaling this SOS from my country. There's an international NGO called the WOLA, which work for advocacy for human rights in the Americas. And they have just asked Biden's government to suspend funding the SMAD, our local riot police enforcers, to suspend their funding. So we are in a very urgent situation. I had to call this into attention because it's been a hard couple of days here, and there's a lot of young people in the streets that are just way too angry and hungry, and there's just no open ears from our government. So we're asking for anybody that's outside to just help us sound that alarm. We need help. Colombia needs help. So thank you for allowing me to use this space. It's just another space to sound that alarm. And that's what I wanted to say about the situation here. So now we can get started our conversations. And for that, I'm going to bring Tom. Hey, Tom, how are you?
I'm okay. That's so hard to hear what's going on. Boy, oh boy. It's interesting. Police violence is such an issue right now in the United States, and making police accountable for their violence. It's I don't know whether you have the same attitude toward the police, but they're supposedly the ones that are supposed to keep us safe, and they're the ones who are, being violent, and it's awful.
It's way too unfortunate. This is something that we should not be talking about, but it's gotten so bad that we need to shine a light as small as we can into this issue. I know that our audience might not feel that this is the space, but it's a direct impact on my future and the future of my country and the future of our students. So we need to shine a light on this.
Yeah.
And well, I want to tie it into what could become, right, if things really get out of control, right? If things really get out of control, we could end up in an authoritarian system that will just impose its will, and that could be really bad. Yeah. So we don't want that to happen, right? But if things could could get that bad, it would end up something like the situation that right now they're going in Myanmar, which is known as Burma, right? So things really get bad. We can end up in a situation as bad as that.
Yeah.
And well, we don't want that. But I want to tie it into what we're going to talk about next. Can you help me navigate this into tying it up with the guest that we have lined up?
Well, we have an amazing guest who over the 25 years he's been going to Myanmar, to Burma. He saw the transition from a military dictatorship to something like an opening to democracy. And now a kind of shift back to that military dictatorship. And he was there the whole time working with people indigenous people, the Karen people, who are the hill people up near the northern Thai border. And they're very persecuted by the government. And he's done an amazing amount of work and has just written a book that we're going to hear about during this conversation we had with this wonderful jungle surgeon. And he's not only a surgeon who works in these very difficult and primitive conditions, he's also a magician. And he's a fascinating guy, and we're going to have some of the interview with him this week and some of it next week. And it connects with we've had a number of programs that connect medicine and magic. And I just spent the last 5 days with the man who started the program in Colombia, Ryan Bart, at his wedding. And he's now finished medical school, and he's going to finish his residency in family medicine the end of June. And he's combining magic and medicine also. So it's a little bit of a theme that has run through some of these conversations. So I think we're going to enjoy Dr. Larry very, very much.
Yes, and it's been wonderful the way that he made the connection with us, because he did say that he wanted to share a lot because he's seen a lot, he's gone through a lot, but he wants to share his experiences because he thinks that other people can do it, right? And he has the playbook of how to do it. So I think that's wonderful. So Tom, if you don't have anything else, let's hear the first part of our interview with our wonderful guest, Dr. Larry Mueller and the jungle surgeon. Does that sound good?
Sounds great. I'm looking forward to hearing him again. It's great.
Awesome. So here we go. I'm going to put you on mute just in case, and we'll put on the video. So here it is.
Okay.
So our guest is going to be Dr. Lawrence Mueller. He's also known as the jungle surgeon, and I am so eager to get this conversation started. But for this, well, I'm going to welcome our founder, Tom. How are you, Tom?
I'm very excited. I think this is going to be a most wonderful conversation. And I don't know whether you know, but I spent 3 weeks in Burma doing, and a couple of weeks in Thailand, performing in the refugee camps on the northern Thai border with Burma. And so I'm very excited to talk with Larry about that, but about his life in magic and his life as a surgeon. And it's going to be fascinating. I'm very excited.
Yes, me too. I think it's going to be a great conversation because I'm pretty sure that his life is fascinating and we're eager for him to tell us a little bit more about that. So let's welcome our guest, Dr. Lawrence Mueller. Dr. Larry, how are you?
Well, I am just fine. Thank you very much, Carlos. And I very much appreciate you inviting me for this podcast. I have Woodstock generation, baby boomer, been doing magic my whole life, which would be over about 65 years of doing magic. But never professionally, always an amateur. And I'm so happy to have this opportunity to share a lot that I learned doing magic, both birthday parties in the States, in the operating room as a surgeon, and then in Burma on the Thai-Burmese border. I spent a month every year for 25 years over there helping the refugees from Burma, and the same thing is going on today. It is not over at all, but there were just no big NGO or non-government organization groups over there helping these people. They didn't know about it. And so all those years when I'd go there, I did major surgery by bringing everything I needed to do it in the jungle and then in a small clinic. But I did safely, had no significant complications for the hundreds and hundreds of operations that I did. And I also did a lot of magic along the way because I had so much fun doing it with the people. They hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
Why? How come they don't see it? Well, first thing is in the jungle, no electricity. And so that means no VHS tapes, Betamax tapes, if you want to go back to the beginning,
Right.
and no DVDs. And there were rare traveling magicians that went there, or traveling entertainers of any type. Why? It was a war zone.
Yeah.
You know, who wants to get shot being an entertainer or something like that? But there was a bit of risk to it. But as a surgeon, every surgeon has risk in that particular profession. I personally know 3 surgeons who are dead from an on-the-job injury, getting hepatitis from a patient that they had to operate on. And so life carries risk, but in bringing pleasure to people's lives is so much fun and rewarding also.
Well, it is. I just want to say it's such an honor to meet you. And just yesterday, I ordered your book, and I'm looking forward to reading that and talking today. About your experiences and ours. And I'd love to know, that old story, like how did you get into magic? When did you start doing magic?
Well, I was a young kid back in the 1950s. And Santa Claus, of course, came under the tree, and we had the Sears and Montgomery Ward's Christmas catalogs. And you go through there and look for a game like Monopoly, Clue, Chutes and Ladders if you're younger. But in the catalogs, they always had boxes of magic tricks that were available. The people, you remember those days, Tom? You were there. And so you'd go through these things. A lot of them were very simple. Yeah, but they were simple kind of tricks, but it introduced you to the field of magic that way.
Yeah, a lot of people ordered so much from Monkey Ward, as they used to call it sometimes, or Sears Roebuck catalog. I remember stores that store was basically empty. It was just a desk with a big catalog, and you could go in there and order anything from a house to a magic kit, from Sears Roebuck. It was kind of amazing. So you got one of those kits that probably had a ball and vase and a few little card tricks and things like that,
And occasionally some tiny linking rings.
And tiny linking rings. So you were how old, do you think, when you or got that under the Christmas tree? Like 10?
Oh, I'd have to say, yeah, 10 would be reasonable because your hands are too small to do some of that stuff, and you had to have that attention span that you would practice just before you could do it. And then I got a little more into it as a young teenager. I was a caddy on a golf course because I was only 14. You get a work permit, but 16 to get the real jobs back then. And when we weren't out looping, carrying bags, we were all back hanging out in the caddy shack, and people had money in their pocket if they did a round. and everyone was playing cards a lot.
Yeah.
Poker, and there's a card game called Guts back then, but the card games are going for hours. And we'd love to have the young caddies come and play with us and share their money with us too.
That's funny.
I got very comfortable shuffling cards and dealing cards.
My very first job was at a driving range. It's really funny. Not at a full-fledged golf course, but a driving range. So that's funny that your first real job was at a golf course. That's great.
Yeah, it worked. Then I had a whole series of other jobs before I finally graduated from medical school. And I'd never have to pick up a job just because I needed the money. And it was convenient to go there.
In my late 20s, I was working on my PhD in psychology, and half the time I worked in a magic shop that I owned with another fella, Milton Nichols, and half the time I worked in the Department of Psychiatry at Hartford Hospital in Hartford, Connecticut. And I forget why I brought that up. Something you were just, 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds. They were 10 and 12-year-old boys. They were our best customers. It just seems to be that age. There's something about that age, 10, 12, that they're beginning to move into adolescence. And I think magic, this would be a wonderful thing to just get your sense about, Larry. What do you think it is about magic that, a 10, 12-year-old is attracted to? What do you think it did for you, developmentally? What did it teach you besides the trick? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Well, I have a comment about tricks. I'll share. You can cut this off if you want. When people call what we do tricks, I say, you want a trick, go down to the city for maybe $100, you can buy yourself a nice trick. But I do magic.
Okay.
And
honest to God, I feel the same way about that word. I never, when I'm doing a magic show, use the word trick. Never. I say, and now the next bit of magic I'd like to do for you. I never say the next trick. I love that you said that. That's so, why do you think that's important? I love that. I've never heard anybody else say that, Larry. That's fantastic.
Really? Well, because if you can do real magic like I can do, then these aren't tricks. And real magic, if you can do real magic, you do the real stuff.
Yeah.
Now here, let me just give you an example here, of real magic. And one of the most common things I do is I ask my audience, and this is far and away for anyone working in third world, if you learn to do one thing, just one, this is the one you should learn. You ask them for a bill from their currency, not mine. Because we're in America here, I'm doing a $1 bill, and it's their money. And you say, watch what I can do. It's just a folding trick, and all I'm going to do is just fold your money up. Now it's not going to disappear. You're going to be able to see it the whole time there. And just by folding it and doing real magic, no tricks here, real magic, I just take your money and we're going to unfold it here, and there is your money back. And then I give that money to my audience, who volunteered the money. You do that in a village. The people will be following you around. Do mine, me. And they'll be waving bills in your face the whole time you're there.
Yeah.
I want to do mine, yes.
It's visual, it's close up, it speaks every language in the world to do it. And for the audience member to walk away a richer person because of it.
Yeah. And it's not a prop, it's a real object.
It's real stuff. Absolutely. Yeah. And so if you're talking to a magician, this is the one to learn to take overseas with you.
That's great. We just did a magic show for a corporation earlier today, Carlos and I and two of our young magicians from the slums of Bogota. And that was the very first trick Carlos did. He changed a 20,000 pesos, Colombian pesos note into a $20 American. 20,000 pesos is what, $4 or so, $4 or $5? Yeah. Sounds like you're a very wealthy person in Bogota. But you're right. There's something about money and magic. It's something people handle all the time. They know it. It's real. My go-to trick on the street is a coin trick, and it changes into a piece of pyrite. I squeeze the coin and it turns into the elemental metal that it was. And there's something about coin magic with money that is real magic, because people, and to make it increase in value is extraordinary.
But to do with their money, and they walk away with seeing their money multiply.
Yeah.
But then the next question is, if you do something like that, you need to have a follow-up, just like for lots of the magic that I do. And so, hey, if I can do one bill, I can do more. And let me just show you here. And I pull out, and I got them all set to go. I got five $1 bills here instead of just one. I showed you with one, but here's one.
Yeah.
Let's get my angles here. 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so I've got 5 $1 bills, and that's all. Nothing else in my hands, just 5 $1 bills. Now, if we remember, I'm not just doing one, I'm doing 5, but the other time I showed you, I had to fold it. Now, at this point, I can take one of these out and ask for, let me have one of yours, and put it in and take mine out and use one of theirs if I want to. But if I take these and, oh my, I got these, the 5 ones, and without doing anything to them, now I got 5 20s. I got $100 right there. The ones are gone because they're all turned into 20s. They're 20, 40, 60, 80. There's 100 of them. $100 right there from 5 $1 bills.
Yeah.
And now if I would borrow someone's, okay, here's your $1 bill back, give me 20. Yeah, it gets expensive, but that's very efficient too, without having to fold it. The extreme burn is my favorite of that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one's good.
This is the live interview. I have to let my cat in the door here. She's scratching on the window. I'll be right back.
Larry, do you remember the first time that you got a positive reaction when you did those kind of tricks, like when you learned them, right? But when was the first time that you tried those out? Do you remember?
Oh, my life was so full of doing lots of things. I can't remember specifically. I wish I could. I just can't.
Okay. The
first show I did, I was in 6th grade. I did in the basement of our house. I made a little stage there, and we had a family reunion there. I had 20 people there, and I did a show down there when I was in 6th grade. I remember that. And the big stage shows I did when I was a resident general surgery, because we had a very interesting group in the hospital, and the Gong Show was popular.
The Gong Show. I remember the Gong Show.
Gong Show, fascinating show, and we all decided because a number of us had some stage things we could do, is let's have a Gong Show for everyone who works at the hospital, because as a surgeon, you're on pediatric ward, you're on medicine wards, you're all over. You got the operating room, the people in the lab, everyone. So you can invite them to come. And I did shows. The first time I was really doing shows was there in the Gong Show. And it's too bad it went off the air. It didn't last that long on TV, but it was a very interesting show, I thought.
It was kind of early America's Got Talent sort of thing.
Yeah.
It was like the beginning of that idea, America's Got, because if you got the gong, it was like getting the hook, right? You
Yeah.
were eliminated from the competition, I think.
Yeah, I actually had a gong that was this big that I had bought when I was living in Korea. They had a lot of brass stuff. I spent 2 years in Korea in active duty in the military, and so we had a real gong, and so it made the show real too. But it was a lot of fun.
That's wonderful. That's great. Wow.
So great, so great. Dr. Larry, I want to get a little bit more about your life. That's so fascinating. You shared with us you started learning magic when you were young. You did a couple of shows, right? And then you did more shows when you were a resident in medical school. When did you start, doing social magic shows? Was it when you were first in Burma, or did you do it before? When did you start to see magic as a great tool to use in a social setting?
Well, talk about magic in a social setting. As a doctor, when I would go in to see a patient, either in the hospital if I was consulted and was rounding on and walked in to meet the new patient, or if a patient would come into my office, and if there was a kid along, and give me a 10 or a 12-year-old boy, they're wise guys and they've seen it all, and they don't want to be there. And I would always go approach them and ask them, "Hey, did you want to come with your mom to this appointment?" And the kid would kind of look at me and they'd shake their head. "No." "Well, I'm going to make it worth your while, and I'm going to show you something that's very interesting that will make you want to come back when your mom comes for a follow-up appointment, and maybe I can show you something different." Then I would show a magic trick or two, cards, rubber bands, bill change or something. And the kid's jaw would drop because he'd never seen magic, live that close, that looked like the real stuff, which is what I do.
Yeah.
No, but I was just, go ahead.
I just was thinking you probably really enhanced his doctor-patient relationship into the future, like doctors aren't people to be afraid of or whatever, that they're okay people. They'll even show you magic.
No, but I also had my patient, the mother, be totally delighted with me before we even started anything, because no doctor ever paid attention to a kid who would come in with mom. But
That's
for me to entertain the kid, right, that just takes takes a minute or two. With, like, say, cards, rubber bands, go down the list.
Yeah.
Of simple things that you can have in your pocket.
That's interesting. One of the very first times I did magic in a hospital, in a pediatric oncology unit, and the child is there in bed, and they've probably been through radiation and other things, and they're bald and really weak and no energy. And you go in and you do something, some magic for them, and they just light up a bit, some energy comes back into their body. And I look past the child over to the child's mom, who's been with this child day after day, week after week, month after month, and tears are running down her face because her child, who's just been listless and no energy, and the child is gone, all of a sudden the child is back. And it was more pleasure for the parent almost than for the child. It was a very moving moment in my life, seeing that, and
which, Tom, is the same thing you see, in third world with the refugees, or in the hide sites, or all these other horrible places where these people have to live because their villages have all been attacked, burned, and then landmined, so they can never go back. But to see the kids happy and smiling, and that kind of thing, when there is no real happiness and no future that anyone really knows about. And it's such a pleasure to share a little joy with them.
Yeah.
Which is not what you get doing magic there's plenty of reasons to do magic at birthday parties. But you do a magic show at an American birthday party, you're always going to get some wise kid. "Well, I know how you do that. I know how you do that."
I have one of those coloring books at home. Yeah, it is something doing magic. It's very different doing magic for kids in refugee camps or in orphanages. It is different. It's sweet, and yeah, it's a challenge sometimes to do birthday parties in the States. But you can do them, and they can be terrific experiences also. But you're right, it can be so amazing for people who have never seen magic. It's
Oh, once the pandemic is over, maybe the birthday parties will happen again.
yeah. Are you still going to Burma?
No, I retired. I'm 71 years old, and I retired as a surgeon last year after doing major surgery for 45 years.
Wow.
Along the way, I have some health problems with my wife now. She's had major surgery, and I'm just not comfortable leaving her alone and me off in a Burmese jungle. And then coming back and finding out, because you can't always be reached over there.
Absolutely.
And so it's time for me to be around for my family and be there for my wife.
Yeah, we were in Ethiopia performing in Sudanese refugee camps, and thank goodness we were working with the United Nations, and we would sleep in their compound inside the refugee camps. And we got a call because we gave the so-called public information officer's phone number to our families back home. And my wife's brother, was, really stricken with something, and he was dying. And it's terrible being far away when that happens. And we did manage to fly back, but I can totally understand wanting to be back here. Are you doing magic at any kind of, well, you're looking forward, I guess you meant, to birthday parties coming back. Maybe you'll do that kind of thing, or school shows, or?
We'll see, it's all kind of to be determined. How this pandemic thing is just put a lid on all of it right now. But we live in Kauai now, where 4 of our 6 children live, 6 of our 10 grandchildren live here. And so we got plenty of family, performing for it. I'm looking for some of my grandkids to show an interest in it and want to learn, but not yet.
How did they all happen to 4 of them end up in Hawaii?
Well, compliments of the U.S. Army. When I got, we had 4 kids when I had finished my second residency in cardiothoracic surgery. I learned how to do open heart, the bypasses, the vein bypasses in the heart, and I was very good at it. First military trained resident to do over 200 cases of major pump surgery on a cardiopulmonary bypass with great results, and hey, wonderful career.
Wow.
And but for my prize, I got sent to Seoul, Korea for chief of surgery U.S. forces over there because my incredibly broad base. Most anywhere in the body except the brain and some of the eyes and a few other special things I could handle. I felt very comfortable with gunshot wounds to the heart and that sort of thing. I knew what to do and how to do it.
Wow.
But
this weekend, it's kind of interesting. This weekend, the person, Ryan Bart, who when he graduated from college, got a Fulbright scholarship and went to Colombia on his Fulbright, and talked the Fulbright people into letting him use 30% of his time in Colombia to start a Magicians Without Borders project in the slums of Bogota. And the most wonderful thing that Ryan did was meet Carlos López, who ended up taking over the program when Ryan left. And then he went to India and worked for us. He took a 2-year gap between undergraduate and medical school. And this week he's finished. He joined the Air Force, first year of medical school, and he's now working in a VA hospital doing his residency in a small town outside of Sacramento. And he's getting married this weekend. And I'm having the honor of officiating at the marriage in Washington State, where he's from, at his family's home. And he's going to, as soon as his residency finishes, he's being transferred to Washington, D.C., because he needs to do, I forget what it is, 4 or 5 years with the Air Force, because they helped pay for his medical school training.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to start, we have a program that I started about 10 years ago called Warrior Wizards. And it's training disabled American vets to be magicians, because I did a tour of VA hospitals in the United States. And I just was so touched from that experience that I thought a vet should really be doing this work. So we started this Warrior Wizard program, and Ryan is going to start a chapter in Washington, D.C. when he gets there in, I think, 2 months. He'll be there, and he's going to start this Warrior Wizard program. And it's a really wonderful way for a vet to, I mean, they don't call it the service for nothing. I mean, I think a lot of vets really have that sense of being in, the service, and that's something in their bones. Some of them, I mean, some vets, like every place, they're there for all different kinds of reasons. But I think the ones that I worked with took immediately to the idea of being a warrior wizard and performing in vet hospitals or deployment parties or holiday parties for vets and their families. So Ryan is gonna, I'm heading off tomorrow morning at 3:30 to go to Washington State.
It's so cool that we got so many, people in health, which is also service, right? That agree with our mission and our vision of Magicians Without Borders. I think that what Tom was saying about service in the military and service in health, it has something to do with that wanting, or that willingness, or I don't know what the adjective is, to provide a service and be of service to someone else. And I think that speaks loudly again with what you did, Larry. And I want to understand, or I want you to guide us through, how did that get started? I mean, you went to medical school, you became a surgeon, they deploy you to Korea to do surgery. How did that life end up with you doing something like this? So can you walk us through how that?
Oh, sure. Sure. First, let me explain how we got to Hawaii. It was a free ride here, compliments to the U.S. Army, because with the orders from San Antonio, Texas to Seoul, Korea, you look on a map and Hawaii's on the way. And so I talked to the travel agent, since they were paying for my family to go too, because it was a company tour. And I said, how about we stop in Hawaii and I'll take 2 weeks of leave. Never been there, grew up in Chicago, and Hawaii was sort of, a slice of heaven from if you live in Chicago. And no problem, Doc, we'll take care of you. And the kids had such a blast here that after 1 year being in Korea, we came back. Instead of going back to the mainland, we just came to Hawaii again. And on the way back, we had free transportation here, back to Hawaii. And one of my kids said, I'm going to live there one day, Dad. This is such a nice place. And he moved here, and he's doing very well. And then another one came out here. So 4 of our 6 kids ended up living here. Who would have thought? Because of the orders to Korea, we found Hawaii.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But your comments about the vets are totally true, that there is a bond among all of us. I can sit and carry on a conversation with any vet anywhere. Oh, where are you stationed? What was your MOS? Military occupational service kind of a thing. And we'd have stuff in common to talk about always, because we were in the same boat, and we were putting our lives on the line, for the country as part of the organization. And so I didn't have much time for veterans organizations or anything because I was so busy. But getting back to Burma, how did I get there? Very interesting story. I had a general surgeon friend that was in Korea with me at the time. He got out of the service. He wanted to go and spend some time working in a hospital supported by his Presbyterian church in Bangladesh. Because you live in Asia for a period of time, a year, 2 years, you learn how the Asian mind works, which is totally different than the Western mind. Things happen differently over there, but once you learn how, you become very comfortable using, their value systems to get things accomplished. And so he moved with his family to this hospital in Bangladesh, and I got a call from him and said, "Hey, you have any interest in coming? I've got some tough thoracic surgery." I was also a chest surgeon that I'm not comfortable doing. I'd love to have you come and take care of these poor people, because otherwise no one's ever going to help them. And I thought, gee, I hadn't been back to Asia. This was several years after I'd gotten out. And I said, sure, I'll take you up on it. I talked to my wife. She said, okay. And so I flew into Bangkok and then into Dhaka, Bangladesh there. And to get to Bangladesh is a long haul. To get from Bangkok there, getting to Bangkok is a pretty easy shot from San Francisco. And it was very nice helping them. They had a very interesting hospital over there. It was very, very well equipped. It wasn't a jungle kind of hospital. But then I kind of realized that it's in my blood to get back to these people. Because while I was in Korea, I talked our hospital commander into letting me use our operating room on a time and space available to help indigent Korean kids who otherwise would have zero chance of ever getting surgery done. Because in these Asian countries, you pay for it or you don't get it. And if you're dirt poor, you don't have money to pay for it. And so that means you don't get it. And having done all this open heart stuff, I was very comfortable doing this other stuff. And so I fixed a bunch of kids who had cleft lips, kind of a thing, and all sorts of other bad scars that they couldn't move their arms. I could fix their scars, kind of a thing. A lot of skin grafting for burns. And I actually took the blue kids who had a heart problem, but they were blue babies because the blood didn't go to their lungs properly. Right. And there was a way you could do that without going on bypass, which I did not have access to. And I turned these blue kids into pink kids, and very, very rewarding kind of stuff. And so when I got the invitation to go back to Bangladesh, I said, yeah, I wanted to do this because it was in my blood and it's in my faith too. I'm a Christian. But Bangladesh was just too far to go. And they had my friend there already. And so I said, let me see and I ended up, I had a friend who lived an hour south of where I was in Central California at the time, who had been in northern Thailand working in a missionary hospital, which would have been a lot easier to get to than Bangladesh. And so we talked about going there to that hospital. He said, oh, man, they'd love to have you there. I'll give you some stuff to take, and they can really use you. I got there, and a friend of mine came who was an OR nurse. And I realized if I was going to be doing surgery, I needed someone who understood English well. And I didn't speak Thai. And so Ron came with me, and we were doing an appendectomy in the middle of the night, and he was my scrub nurse. I was talking to the anesthesiologist about it, and he looked at me after the case and said, hey, can I come with you when you go? I said, yeah, sure. Interesting time. You're just out of nowhere. And so I get to this hospital. We get there together. I'm at the hospital, and he is just kind of hanging around. He went to an old church of the faith that he was, a Christian faith. He said, let's see what's going on there. And I get to the hospital, and it is totally modernized. It was not what my friend told me it was at all. They did the supplies they had, because they had, instead of just wooden mats on small wooden beds on the floor with mats people slept on, no, they had mattresses with cushions and everything else. And I realized right then, this is not going to work. What am I doing here? How am I going to tell my friend that we made a mistake? So I meet my friend Ron that evening, and he says, hey, let me tell you where I was. I met some refugees from Burma. And I told them we were here, and they said they could really use our stuff because no one is there helping them. And at the same time, I realized one door shuts, the other one opens.
Yeah.
We went with them. We went to the border to the Thai-Burmese border, and where we went is best shown in the Rambo 2008 movie, where Stallone is taking doctors up the river in his longtail boat. I was on that river many, many times, going up in longtail boats as a doctor, but Stallone wasn't there. So anyhow, I got involved with the Karen Hill tribe.
Yeah.
And, they had an operating room, but it was so unsupplied with supplies. They were using fishing line for suture, and that was it. No one was there helping them. And all of a sudden the door opened. I said, I've got to help these people. And they were Christian too, like me. They were converted from Buddhism a century or two earlier. That's an interesting story too. But I went to, and then I went back the next year, brought a whole bunch of stuff for the hospital, and actually had Sea Land volunteer to ship a 20-foot container flight filled up with supplies, humanitarian stuff, and a lot of medical stuff, new OR table. Got their hospital all fixed up. Then, unfortunately, the hospital got attacked by the Burmese army, just as happening now. Everything got destroyed with that. Well, it was a good thought. And so I said, I can't walk away from these people, even though where my main mission is gone. And so, but I had to set up a surgery program somewhere because landmines were everywhere. All these people were getting their legs blown off, which were not lethal at the time, but they would be lethal with the infections and all that happens. But I knew how to fix them. I could train their medics how to do amputations, as long as we had the right tools, which I did. And then I set up in a clinic, an outpatient clinic, right on the border on the Thai side, so the Burmese army wouldn't touch it. And go there every year, and I did a couple dozen operations every year, and they saved the patients for me that would come through the clinic. And then I taught them the medics I worked with, how to do a lot of straightforward stuff, and had a very interesting time over all those years. Finally, it looked like things were settling out, and so the Thai people said, hey, we want to send all these people home. Their refugee camps were full of people over there. We're talking thousands and thousands. And so we're going to shut the refugee camps and we're going to close these clinics down because now that peace has come to Burma, because they had elections then and all that. The government wasn't going to, the military generals that stole it after the Brits left after World War II. That was it. And so, okay, that is that. And so, and that didn't happen that long ago. But then, of course, all these wars started over again that you see on the news, and so it was just a big hoax. Yeah. But by then, I retirement, and my wife had open heart surgery, and it just got so I just couldn't do it again. I couldn't leave her alone. Yeah. So, but now by writing the book, I wrote the book for some very specific reasons because I couldn't follow it. One first is for doctor surgeons in general who can do what I could do. This is how you do it in the third world, and you can do it very safely, but here's what you need to do it safely. And then it's for young kids. I read Tom, you're old enough to remember Tom Dooley's books. They were bestsellers.
Sure, absolutely.
Sure, yeah. In fact, Kennedy, JFK, started the Peace Corps because of those books, because there was so much interest in them.
Absolutely, yeah.
But when's the last time you read a book like that? The few books that have been written are written by doctors who are at hospitals supported by a church, and it's very proselytizing. Because they want to know that give donations to this church to give our hospital because we're spreading the faith kind of a thing.
Or like farmers work down in Haiti, amazing. Paul Farmer's work is just another marvel. I wanted to ask you something, Larry. When you said when you were back in Karen refugee, it sounded like hospital clinic. And you referred to their medics. What? Who were they, and that you trained, or what was that? Did they have barefoot kind of doctors, sort of people, or?
Well, no, everyone wore thongs or something. people barefoot. No, there was very rare to find an MD, because for the Karen Hill tribe, they didn't have medical schools there. Right. And their schools weren't recognized. They had a lot of elementary schools and high schools that they had in their villages, but these weren't recognized by the Burmese government. And so they couldn't have anyone go to medical school, so there were no MDs. So that was it. You had a couple of them, but they weren't really fully trained in modern stuff and how to do like the surgery that I could do and train them. And so I took the medics for my starting point, and for two reasons. One were the civilian medics that were taking care of the people in the refugee camps, and the other were the military medics. In the Army, there were 91Cs, 91 Charlies that I worked a lot with because they were the ones that saved the soldiers' lives as best they could. And so I did a lot of training when I was over there. And while I was getting a new OR built, in fact, I just went and I did training for the whole trip. But I trained, a couple hundred of them. Became involved with the Free Burma Rangers, which is a fascinating group that I was there from the beginning of people who go and help the refugees inside Burma. And so very involved with all this kind of stuff I did. I felt, having been in the Army for 10 years, I didn't have a fear of this kind of thing. When your number's up, your number's up. And being a surgeon, you can try to live the most careful life you can. And then next week, what do you have? Metastatic colon cancer, which you did nothing to cause, but it's going to kill you. Right. It can't be treated. Or you get in an auto accident. So many patients, that I took care of, they didn't ask for these problems.
No.
But and so to try to plan your life and, I want to be safe. I want to be safe. Well, you can't be safe as a human. You're going to die one day, maybe sooner, maybe later. You don't know.
I mean, that's wonderful that you train some of those medics, and deepen their knowledge of medicine, and even they were able to do some general surgery even?
Yes, they could. I trained them. I was very careful with what I trained, but the kids never got operations. And so one of the big things, we're here with 3 men here, are groin hernias. We call them inguinal hernias.
Yeah.
Where the blood supply and the vas goes down to the scrotum, there's a hole there in the muscle. And that hole can get bigger. Then all of a sudden you got this big bulge in your groin. It's called a hernia. It's one of the most common operations done in America are to fix those. And you got to dissect in and move the stuff around and sew it up. In America, we put patches in, but I would not put patches in over there in case there was a problem with it, because no one would know how to take it out. But I taught them the old way of how to do this and fix these things. So I had patients literally had groin hernias the size of footballs hanging down in their thigh.
And that's so painful.
Yeah. Well, it restricted what they can do, and they had to work, or they didn't eat, and their families didn't eat. They had to live with these things. But for come to me, and I would just erase the thing, and they'd all of a sudden have a new life. Yeah, so that's very rewarding kind of stuff to do.
And that's magic.
Well, it is. Yes.
Sounds like real magic. Yeah.
Like I mean, even like you could make that disappear. That hernia. I mean, that was limiting that person's life so much.
But it wasn't just stuff like that. They have women come in with these breast cancers that would be as big as your fist that have grown out this big open ulcer, and I'm thinking it was going to kill them.
Oh.
There's no question about it. And they had no way to fix it, but I could remove the breast, take out all that. And even if it already spread, at least they wouldn't have this ugly, painful, bleeding mass on their chest.
Yeah.
When they passed, and they gave them a shot at possibly being a cure to the thing if it hadn't already spread. But lots of things like that, very rewarding kind of surgery. Because if in America, someone comes to your office who needs an operation, and if you don't do it for whatever reason, someone else will.
Yeah.
Everyone in America, you got a bad problem, go to an ER. Doesn't matter what you got for money or resources, the ERs have to take care of you.
Right.
It's the law, and take care of you. But over there, if I wasn't there doing it, or my medics that I trained doing it, it didn't happen.
And no one else is there for that. Like there's no other option. There's just no other option for them.
No, none. If they had a lot of money, they could go to a Thai hospital or a Burmese hospital and get questionable kind of care, but at least they had something. But with no money, and the poor people don't have money.
Yeah.
There's a saying in the Gospel of Matthew that I never forgot, and it is and it's in the front page of my book, on the title page. Whatever you do this is Jesus talking. Whatever you do for the least of my brethren, that you do unto me. Mm-hmm. And so, it's kind of guided me. And so if I'm helping these people, I'm trying to make up for the sins in my life. I'm perfect. No one is. Yeah. And cross over to the other side and say, hey, what about these people I helped, huh?
I mean, that idea, Larry, that quote from Matthew, that's the extraordinary idea, that Christianity, and I can't think of other religions as much as, say, Buddhism is so much into compassion and all of that stuff that the Christian idea that if you do it to the least of, you do it to God. I mean, that's a crazy idea. I mean, that's amazing idea, you know? I mean, it's just extraordinary.
So that was our interview with the first part of Dr. Lawrence Mueller, jungle surgeon. Any final thoughts on this wonderful conversation, Tom?
Hearing it a second time,
Mhm.
that he just really loved doing that, and that just brought so much meaning to his life. He lived this regular, often living in California and working in probably a pretty fancy, well-equipped hospital, doing regular surgeries. And then once a year for a month, he would go into this totally different world where he could do good that nobody else was doing. I mean, if he wasn't there, it didn't get done, as he said, except for those medics that he trained to do some things. I just loved hearing that, and I know how much meaning the work that we've done with Magicians Without Borders has brought to your life. It's brought to my life, and Ryan Bart, who we were just talking about. I mean, his time with Magicians Without Borders is a touchstone in his life. It's brought him so much meaning. And so anyhow, it's great hearing that interview. And I look forward to hearing the second half next week.
Yes, I'm here for that as well. And I wanted to remind everybody, if you want to get his book, Jungle Surgeon, you can go to Amazon. The link is on the comments, and you can get it. It's a wonderful book with those stories and the playbook on how to do them, both the medical stuff and the magic stuff, and it's just wonderful. So thanks again to Dr. Larry for being here with us. We pre-recorded this last Thursday, and we're gonna do a second part next week as well.
Yeah.
And well, that's our show, Tom.
Well, I just wanted to bring it back to the beginning, and I'm sorry that things are in such chaos and disturbance in your wonderful country, and I hope some good comes out of the protests, and I hope some of those tax policies that are just really going to hurt the poor people get rescinded and drawn back. And anyhow, I'm thinking of you, and I'm so happy you brought that to our attention. Thanks, Carlos.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for allowing me to do so, and also for our audience to allow me to do so. And yeah, I definitely hope the same, that this can be the beginning of something that's better, of something that's brighter, something that's fruitful.
Yeah.
So wonderful show, Tom. It's always wonderful to see you and see your face. I love it every time.
Thank you. Thank
so
you
much.
very much.
And
okay.
Thank
Give
you,
my
everyone.
love to that wonderful wife of yours.
I will.
Okay.
Same thing over there. And goodbye, everybody.
Okay. Good night. Good night, everybody.